Hello, welcome back. We're taking a look at the inevitability of awakening today, at time, at eternity, and your choice. Yeah, how's that for a nice 15 to 20-minute conversation? First of all, the title, You Will Awaken. Yeah, you will. You are going to awaken. When is completely up to you. It really is. It is your decision right now in the present moment. If you're experiencing resistance to the idea that you can, that you must, and indeed that you will become awakened or enlightened or find yourself at home in God or whatever kind of language you want to use to describe setting the ego aside, use whatever language you want. It's on and it's going to happen. Now, you don't have to choose to do this in the next 15 minutes. So if you're experiencing some extraordinary ego resistance, well, that happens to all of us. The ego is extremely resistant. It will fight with everything it appears to have against your own awakening. It is only correct in one thing, and this is something that Jesus tells us here in the Course, in its terror that you will set it aside, because you will. So how can any teacher, how can I say, how can anyone say with complete confidence that you will awaken? You've never left your source. Ideas leave not their source. This is a dream from which we're waking up. How soon you do, in large part, is up to you and your own free election right now in the present moment. You don't have to believe a single thing that this video or any other spiritual text or video or podcast says. You can think that it is all complete garbage, complete BS and nonsense, and run off and do your thing for the next however many days, weeks, months, and years remain to you in this lifetime. In other words, you can do whatever you want. This is intended to serve as just kind of a reality check for us, isn't it? It's intended to serve as a comfort, but also a statement of reality. Nobody is going to force you to embark on the spiritual path. Jesus certainly is not going to force you, and the Holy Spirit is not going to force you to forgive the Son of God, to learn this course, or any other spiritual tradition for that matter. The Holy Spirit does not force, it does not coerce, ever, ever. So to walk what we call the path is up to us. And this is intended to bring some comfort to you, because outside forces are not in control of you and your life and your destiny. Guess what? There are no outside forces. So having made all this up, we can unmake it. The more we're exposed to this idea, the more comforting I hope you find it. You're not the victim of the world you see. Very well-known lesson, by the way, from the workbook for students. I'm not a victim of the world I see. We're not subject to God's whim. God doesn't have a whim. He doesn't bless some people and chastise other people and make other people to suffer needlessly. It's not the way it works. This is true despite what many of us, and I include myself in that category, were told growing up. This is certainly worth a longer story, but I was personally raised in not one, but two fundamentalist traditions growing up. First fundamentalist church, my parents left. The second one, I left on my own. And just because I was happy to do it doesn't mean that it doesn't present a forgiveness opportunity for all of us, as it did for me. Yeah. So, specifically in the text today, we've moved on to chapter 5, section 6, which is called Time and Eternity. Yeah, eternity is our reality with God. It's eternal, like it says. It's not subject to ideas like space and time, suffering. The realm of the ego doesn't touch it at all. We are eternal. This is not eternal, is it? We don't even know if the physical body is going to be alive in 15 minutes, really, when we're honest with ourselves, much less surviving another 4 decades or 5 decades or whatever the case may be. No, we don't know. The reality is everything in this world is constantly changing. This is what's going on in time. In time, we appear to be born. We appear to have something that we call a childhood, and then a young adulthood, then something we call middle age, where this begins to happen with increasing frequency. You know, then we have what we call old age, and then the communication mechanism completely craps out utterly, proving its total impermanence, right? So the thing that is difficult for us to accept sometimes is that we've elected to be in time. We've chosen to see ourselves as separate, and we are experiencing the attendant suffering of that. In other words, the consequences of that. They're not coming from God. God's not punishing us. We've not sinned against God. One can't sin against one. We're at home in God. We've never left our source. There is no separate other against whom to transgress. There can't be sin. This is something that we need to hear many, many, many times because many of us are raised in a Judeo-Christian tradition, or if not that, in a Western society that bandies the word sin about all the time. And sinner, and people are invited and encouraged to see themselves as miserable sinners worthy of punishment and death. Right? It's where we appear to find ourselves. Yet God has no ego to be offended. The ego is simply a mistake. We've given it all the power it appears to have, and we can withdraw that. So as we go forward here, studying and practicing, learning this course, we're withdrawing our allegiance from the ego, recognizing it for the absolute nothingness that it is. It's nothing. But when we believe that we're an ego, when we believe that we're an individual, then we make everything real for ourselves. We make this real. And what appears to be solid, only it's really not solid. When you think about it, how could a structure that's 80% water actually be called solid anyway? Something that's constantly replenishing itself as one cell dies and another one takes its place. That's not solid, is it? It's constant change, which is not solid. And anything that changes, anything that transforms, that switches form, including energy itself, anything that changes is not of God. It's illusion. And we can, and Jesus tells us here, must, and we're going to add will, set it aside. What can you do right here if you don't believe any of this? Well, understand, if you take nothing out of our conversation today, that this election to be an individual body, an ego, right, separated, or to be at home in eternity in God, this election, this choice is free and alterable. You can change your mind at any moment if you are done with all of the travails of egoville, with suffering and with pain, with conflict, constant conflict on so many different levels. If you're, in fact, done with that and you want the peace of God and only that, you can choose to leave this behind. This is a choice that we can make. Because the reality is we don't belong here in time, in this thing that we call planet Earth, in this thing that we call a human body, which we're not really in, but people are fond of saying that we're in it. How's that even possible? It's not. Yet here we are, where this appears to be running around, interacting with other things that look similar to this. I mean, really, this is not our home. Deep down, we all know that. If you did not know that, you would not be watching this video. Really, you would not be interested in spirituality in general, much less A Course in Miracles, which is very specific and makes absolutely no mistake about the fact that there is no world. There is no death. The Son of God is free. I am not a body. I am free, for I am still as God created me. Lesson 199, and then lessons 201 through 220, where that is the foundational idea of 20 straight days of review. Make no mistake about it. The ego is a mistake. We can and must and will set it aside. And perhaps today is the day where you really, truly, unequivocally make that decision for yourself. And I hope that that may be the case. That's exciting if that's true. And this lands for you. That's excellent. Good. Very good. The reality is we could choose eternity instead of this. So let's do that. We're invited to do that, to choose eternity instead of all of this. Jesus tells us here in paragraph 2 that his role is to unchain our will. Yes, set it free. The ego opposes this vehemently, of course, with everything it appears to have, which is nothing. Yet it shouts very loudly at you sometimes, doesn't it? It wants you to stay stuck in what we deem to be our comfort zone, which is so uncomfortable that we seek to end it, to set it aside, right? It has us even contemplating spirituality in the first place. The fact that this suffering, this state of conflict is intolerable. And while we mistake it for reality, it should be intolerable. If you've arrived at the point where you really want the peace of God and nothing else, very, very good. So sometimes we have to suffer so much and hit what we deem to be rock bottom before we actually embark on the path with any kind of earnestness with any seriousness at all. Before we mean business, so to speak, we have to go through some serious shit. And that, well, that very well may be the case for you. Many of us have just such a story where we finally hit the bottom, and it didn't appear that the situation in life could get any worse. And then we began to climb out, to use a visual there. And Jesus tells us here, paragraph 2, you can and must escape from the ego. And you will set it aside. We're all home already. So what we call a path, a walk, a journey is not actually a physical journey at all, in the sense that we would make a journey from one place to another here in the world. We're already at home. We're simply clearing the blocks to our awareness of this. So we're not really going anywhere. If you're called to go to a retreat in Bali or Costa Rica, or a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela or Lourdes, or someplace like that, or Rome, great, fantastic. Go. And while you're in France and Italy, have some fabulous food and wine, please. And write in the comments where you were, please, and what it was like, and what you had to eat, and how much you enjoyed it, because that would be cool. Thank you. Yeah. If you're called to do something like that, great. The reality is we're not going anywhere. There is no separate place. We're at home in God, where we've always been. We're simply clearing the barriers that we ourselves have erected to this experience, to this awareness. We're clearing the barriers here and the blocks to our awareness of who we are, to our awareness of truth. As the Course puts it, to our awareness of love's presence, God being love, simply is. The more we clear, the more light shines through. And perhaps that's happening for you. And it's inspiring, isn't it? It inspires us to keep going, to keep forgiving the Son of God, because, like it or not, you're interested in spirituality. And you know what this means, is that you can't go back. None of us can go back, nor would we. Why? Why would we go back to the way things were? It would not be satisfying to us, and we develop the certainty that it's not worthy of the Son of God anyway. The way things were, with constant conflict and suffering, and identifying as an ego, competing with other egos for all of the trinkets and things that appear in our experience here in the world, it's not worthy of the Son of God, who belongs at home in God, one with. So the more we forgive, the more we allow our inner teacher to direct our entire experience, thought, speech, activities. The more we give over our entire experience to our inner teacher for our inner teacher's guidance, the more we set the ego aside, the more we recognize its unimportance, the more we recognize its nothingness. You will awaken. Now, it doesn't have to be today, but wouldn't that be great if it were? And the choice for God, for the strength of Christ that you make right now, today, helps contribute to that awakening, helps catapult you across the finish line, so to speak, helps you to drop the last shreds of ego-based resistance to the light of truth, which shines all of that resistance away, shines the darkness away, like turning on a light in a dark room. Wouldn't that be amazing? We have a free and alterable choice. This course is all about changing our mind. So let's do just that, shall we? All right. Thank you, as always, for joining me here. Comments and questions are more than welcome. I welcome them here. So if you do have a comment or a question, please feel free to leave it here. And the subscription button is the red arrow. If you've not subscribed yet, please do so. Go ahead and hit that arrow and subscribe to this channel. It's an international community of people that are interested in A Course in Miracles. Now, these videos are for people of all experience levels. They're just as relevant for a brand new beginner as they are for someone that has been practicing this material for 30 years. In fact, for those of us that have been at this a long time, these repeat performances, so to speak, become even more important, because the more we get into something, the more experience we have in any discipline, anywhere, right, in this lifetime, the more prone we are to think that we don't need to learn something. We don't need to hear a certain idea again because it's so yesterday, right? So speaking to those of you who are experienced students, the repetition has great value, doesn't it? Right? I invite you, no matter what your experience level is, and even if you're just checking out the course and you are not a course student, welcome again. This is just as relevant. This produces a lot of different thoughts in people. So if it raises some challenges or questions, that is perfectly normal and a part of spiritual inquiry, no matter what your practice or practices look like, no matter what tradition you've grown up in. So I do hope that you feel welcome to ask questions if you've got them, because in so doing, you will inevitably help people on the other side of the world whom you're not likely to ever meet in person, because they may have the same question too. And they'll get something from your asking it in a way that you may not even be aware of. So let me make you aware of that. You can be of great help, not only to yourself, but to others here on the path, simply by asking questions sometimes, which is very cool. It's one of the cool things about all this modern technology. So thank you, as always, for joining me, and I will see you all very soon.